Hola y'all, welcome back to my channel. It's Michelle and you are watching Shelly Flowers Reads and Writes, where I talk about all things related to writing, to books, possibly to teaching, and anything else you might have questions about. So today I am filming my April wrap-up. April was such a good month for me. I actually was able to finish 8 books in 1 month, which is huge. I have not read that many books in 1 month in such a long time. So let's go ahead and get started. First up, we have Farewell to Manzanar by Jian Waratsuki Houston. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. So this is a story that I rated 4 stars. It is the first-hand account of a woman who survived the Japanese internment camps in the United States during the 1940s in World War II. Overall, I found this book to be an incredible story. I'll be honest, at first I was going to give this 3 stars. It is written for much younger audiences, and so most of the information that was being told I knew and I understood, and it wasn't bringing anything new to the table. However, what really changed my mind was the second half, really, like, you can see where all my tabs are. Really, it was like right at the end of this book. She starts to talk about reacclimating herself into American life once World War II was over and once the camps were closed, and the struggles that she spoke about in terms of feeling like an outsider no matter where she went. She wanted to try out for, I think it was like homecoming queen or something like that at her high school, and because she looked the way she looked with her long dark straight hair and, you know, her facial features and her skin color, she wasn't allowed to do that. And then her family would get so upset with her because they felt like she was betraying her Japanese American heritage. So that is a struggle I think anybody who is an immigrant or the child of an immigrant can relate to, because you always know that you can never make anybody fully happy when you just want to exist and be who you are. In Spanish, we have this saying, ni de aquí, ni de allá. It literally translates to, we're not from here and we're not from there. And I think that's exactly what this book encapsulates. I think it's also an excellent reminder that this country has not always been kind to people, particularly people of color. And there's been this consistent, systematic oppression of people. And to think otherwise, I think you're just being willfully ignorant of our country's history. So overall, 4 stars, I highly recommend. It's a really easy read as well. All right, next up we have AIDS Memoir by Catherine Wyatt Morley. So this book is a 3-star read for me. I don't know that it's widely available. I was trying to do some research on this book, and it's produced by Kumarian Press. It was also distributed through the CDC, at least looking at the sticker inside my book. It talks about how it's being distributed from the CDC. So I don't know. Overall though, I would say that this book has such a fascinating premise. It essentially is the first-hand account of a woman who was diagnosed with HIV and AIDS in the 90s. She was a straight monogamous Black woman, and it was just so fascinating to me because I'd never really heard that particular story before. And what I really appreciate about it is how it can help to demystify and destigmatize a disease that is oftentimes, you know, flooded with prejudice, really, you know? And so I think getting to read a first-hand account of someone who had HIV and AIDS and who still has it, because I believe she's still alive today, although it's kind of hard to find information about her, I think this is a story that everyone should know about. The reason why I'm giving this book 3 stars, however, is because of the structure. So this book is an epistolary novel, or really an epistolary memoir. And for those of you who don't know, epistolary structure means anything that functions with a journal entry or letters. Nowadays, you'll even see books that are comprised of like emails and blog posts and even Twitter posts and things like that. Those are all epistolary novels and books because they take these like first-hand letters and accounts written by the person themselves and comprise them together into a book. I actually really do not like that structure. For me, it makes me feel completely removed from the characters. It makes me feel like I don't have that one-on-one connection, which is odd because you'd think if I was reading their own ideas and their own personal stories, I would be able to build that connection more. But in reality, what it does to me is it has this tendency of separating me from the action. And since I can't see what the character is doing and I can't see what other people in this character's life are doing, I feel like I'm sort of trapped in a journal, essentially. That's kind of how I feel about it. So overall, I really love the content and the premise of this book. I just did not like the structure. Okay, next up we have Dark Tide by Jennifer Donnelly. I got a lot to say about this book, so I'm warning y'all now. I'm gonna drink some tea and then we will get into it. So, I gave this book 3 stars. Here's the thing. I love mermaids. I have been obsessed with Little Mermaid since I was 3 years old. I have a mermaid tattoo. I have been to Weeki Wachee Springs in Florida where they do old school mermaid shows. Like, you tell me there's a mermaid situation happening, I am there. That's not my issue with this book. Let's start with the pros, because I think there's actually a lot that's done extremely well. So Jennifer Donnelly did an incredible job of world building in this book. We can talk first about this map. So it's basically a map of the world as it kind of currently looks now, except she renamed a lot of the seas where the kingdoms take place in this book. And that's something that I really appreciate, because it's like, urban fantasy is not the right word, but it's definitely like a present day fantasy. So I'm on board for that. The other thing that I really appreciate is that she took the time to create an entire glossary for her book. So as you can see, she's created all these words. You know, it's not a full language, but I appreciate that she took the time to think about, okay, if these creatures are living underwater, what might some of their vocabulary differences be? And then also it's just the story structure itself. So this is a series, it's the 3rd book in the Waterfire saga, and it basically shows mermaids from all over the world. I believe there's 6 of them total, who are coming together to defeat a big bad. Great. And I think the way that she built her action scenes, you can feel the tension, you can feel, you know, all of that kind of stuff build up. And I believe these books are middle grade. They definitely skew younger. So if it's not middle grade, it's definitely like a younger YA, like a middle school kind of YA. All of that is awesome. And that is what frustrates me so much about these books, is that it could be so much more, but it just doesn't take that extra step to really think through some of the content. So here's what I mean by that. There are literally mermaids from every single continent in these books. Not one mermaid is from Africa. She did include an Afro-Brazilian mermaid, which I thought was really cool. There's only one Latina mermaid, but she's Afro-Brazilian, so I'm here for it. The thing is though, it doesn't take that long to just Google, you know, water-based traditions in Africa. There are so many countries in Africa that have really beautiful traditions and cultures related to water. Madagascar is an island. Like, I don't know. I have very little patience for this kind of stuff because it's so easy to just double check. You could pull from Senegalese traditions. Like, if you look up pictures of Senegal, like, you will see pictures of people surfing. If you look up pictures of Somalia, you will find pictures of fishing boats and fishing traditions. Hell, even in Nigeria and other parts of West Africa, there's the Yoruba religion. There are 3 different orishas dedicated to different types of water within that religion. So it just doesn't make any sense to me that she didn't take the time to notice, oh shoot, I left out an entire continent when I was writing this book. I don't know. To me, it just smacks of laziness in terms of research. I will also say, and I could be wrong on this, so if I am wrong, please let me know, but I'm pretty sure the only character that speaks with an accent is the Afro-Brazilian mermaid. Like, that is just so blatant to me. You're gonna tell me that you have 3 different European mermaids from 3 different countries. I'm pretty sure one's from Italy, one's from Poland, and I can't remember where the other one's from. And they don't have accents? You have a mermaid from India and another mermaid from China. They don't have accents? I don't get it. I just don't get it. It feels very othering to me. It feels very blatant, but it also feels very lazy. And that's the kind of stuff that I think holds this series back. It could have been so much more, but because maybe she didn't have a sensitivity reader, these books were written a few years ago where that wasn't so much of a common practice. I think they were written in like 2014 to 2015. So I don't know. But even then, like, it's hard for me to accept that kind of stuff because I just feel like Google is free. The information's out there. You just need to take the time to do some research. And I think, again, this also just shows the benefits of having a sensitivity reader, of having someone in your circle who is gonna push you to think through some of these questions. Not because I'm some kind of social justice warrior who feels like, you know, if you don't do representation the way that I want you to do it, then you're immediately problematic and you need to be canceled. But because logically, to me, it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. I don't see how you can have this story that's supposed to be a global mermaid story and then leave out an entire continent. I don't get it. So, and that's the other thing is like indigenous cultures that also include practices based around water. Here's the flip side to that. Let's say you are a white author or a non-Black author or a non-Indigenous author, and you do want to include these elements in your story and you just don't know how to do it. So you choose to leave it out instead. I think that's basically what Jennifer Donnelly did. I don't think that that has to be the case. Like I am someone who is a firm believer in buying books by Black, Indigenous people of color, by buying books written by LGBTQ people, you know, by disabled people. I am 100% on board for that. But I also feel like by choosing to do a more global story, you kind of sign yourself up for trying to be as inclusive as possible. And if you don't do that, then you have to be willing to understand the criticisms that might come along with it, right? So what do you do in that situation? You can ignore it, not include it at all in your story, and basically leave out an entire group of people simply because you didn't want to deal with that discomfort. Or let's say you do it and you just don't do it well, and then your entire career's in jeopardy, or, you know, people despise your book and you get all these think pieces written about it. I don't know. I just feel like it doesn't have to be so all or nothing. It can be a little bit of both. You can push yourself to write about things that maybe you aren't as familiar with. Just do your research. Hire sensitivity readers. Hire people from those cultures who will take the time to educate you. Pay people their due, and you won't have issues like this. So, I don't know. I'm going on a little bit of a rant, and I want to stop here because I don't want to turn this into just a shit on this book series kind of moment, because there's a lot of good that's happening in this series, and I don't think it's completely terrible. I just think it could have been so much more if just a little bit of time was taken in terms of research. So let me know your thoughts. Do you think I'm going overboard? Do you think I'm being completely unreasonable? Or do you think I might have a point? And do you think that in the day and age that we're in, it is time that authors, no matter what your background is, actually take the time to do their research and understand the cultures that they're either leaving out of their books or that they are doing a poor job of representing? I would love to hear what you guys have to think about that. I need to drink some tea after that because that was a lot of talking. I'm gonna zip through the next few books because I think overall my feelings about them are pretty standard. Hansel and Gretel Get the Word on the Street by Al Ortolani. So this book was a 3-star for me as well, but this was more because I just thought it was fine. I really appreciated this author's perspective. He teaches middle school, and so all of these poems are about teaching middle school, and as a middle school teacher, this is very accurate. So if you are a teacher who might be looking to read some poetry that might be related to your profession, I suggest reading this book. It's just like kind of a fun, silly book. The reason I'm giving it 3 stars though is that I didn't find it particularly wowing or anything like that. I just thought it was very basic and nothing new was written in here that I haven't ever seen or heard before. Next, we have Trouble in Mind, the short story in conflict. So this is a collection of literary fiction stories from the Missouri Review. And these stories were all winners or runners-up of the Jeffrey E. Smith's Editor Prize. So I think that prize is about $4,000 to $5,000. And essentially it's given out every year. You can apply to it, and I think the reading fee is like $25. So it's kind of an expensive prize to apply to, but the pot itself is really big. The thing is though, I hated these short stories. There were only 4 that I liked. I'm gonna link them down below. And this book was a 2-star from me. I talked about this a little bit in my 8-hour readathon, but I get really frustrated by the way that a lot of literary writers try to focus on being clever rather than writing well. And that's what a lot of this book was. Just because it's hard to understand your work doesn't mean it's actually good. It just means you did not do a good job of conveying the ideas you were trying to get across. So, not a fan of it. However, I did really like the 4 stories that I did like, so I would appreciate it if you guys checked out those links down below. So now we're getting to one of my favorite books of the month, Hidden Figures by Margot Lee Shetterly. This book was phenomenal. I gave it 4 stars. I just was so inspired after reading this book. It's very different from the movie, so I will say if you were a fan of the movie and just wanted to learn more about the 3 main characters, Mary Jackson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Katherine Johnson, definitely pick up this book because you're gonna learn so much about their life before they actually got to NASA. Now, the cool thing about this is that I actually bought this book from NASA. As some of you guys might know, I live in Florida, so we drove over to Titusville for my son's 5th birthday last year, and I saw the book on the shelf and I figured, hey, I love getting books as souvenirs, so this will be the perfect book to get for my trip to NASA. And then it sat on my TBR shelf for a year and a half. So I love buying books and then not reading them. You know, I feel like that's a very booktube problem to have. But I've been working on that a lot. And thankfully I decided to start reading some of these books that have been sitting on my shelf because this book was just so good. I have so many tabs in here of how many times I found the story just inspirational, or there was just some kind of truth telling that was going on. And I'll be honest, like, again, similarly to Farewell to Manzanar, this book is just such an excellent example of how this country has systematically prevented people, especially people of color, from accessing opportunity, and opportunity that would help improve the lives of everyone. Like, I just don't get it. When everyone gets what they need and everyone has the opportunity to do what they love, everyone does better. We went to the freaking moon because of these women's calculations. I don't understand why this is such a difficult concept for people to get. Like, if you pay people their fair wage, if you allow people to access things like education and proper healthcare and employment opportunities, overall the standard of living for everybody else is going to improve. And this book is such an excellent example of that. What I also really appreciate was how in depth it went to from their childhoods all the way up to their working at NASA. So you get a really excellent view of what life was really like in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, all the way up to the 60s, especially for Black women. And again, like, I just am gushing about this book because I think it's such an excellent blend of history, of science, and of just social workings and understandings of our country. So definitely 4 stars. Definitely check it out if you haven't checked it. The only reason I didn't rate it 5 stars was because there are a lot of parts of the text that are a little bit more technical, so they'll go deep into different machines that were being used at the time or equations that were being used, and I am not a math person. I really kind of struggle with understanding that kind of stuff, so a lot of that went over my head, and I kind of skimmed through those parts. But if that is your thing, then I would recommend this book. Okay, next up we have I'll Tell You a Love Story by Corey Johnson. I gave this book 3 stars, mainly because, again, it was a situation where I really loved the premise, but I did not love the structure of the book, similarly to Ade's memoir. Now, with this book, like, Corey Johnson's voice is so distinct, and I'm pretty sure this is her first collection. I wouldn't call it like a novel. It's more of a collection of short stories that have very similar themes and premises within them. It's a little bit whimsical, a little bit fairy tale retelling, a little bit satire, so I really appreciate that about it. In fact, one of my favorite stories in here is the story of Satan's daughters and how one of them works in a call center and the other one is a televangelist, and I love that premise. I think it's so funny. So this is actually a pretty solid read if you're looking for something quick and easy. I think it took me maybe 2 hours to read the whole thing. My main issue with it is that I felt like some stories were way too short and some were way too long. So I don't know if it's because I'm a poet, and so when I think about structure, I think about it differently from a fiction writer, but I just felt like some stories could have used a lot of editing down, whereas other stories could have beefed up, because there are some stories in here that are only about 1.5 pages, and I just wanted to see more of it. Now, I will also say this book was produced by the local press in my city, Jacksonville, Florida. It's called Bridge 8 Press, and every year they release multiple books like this. So I didn't love last year's prize winner, and I'm going to talk about that in my video on Wednesday, but this year was pretty solid. They also have another book, which I have right here, called Alligator Zoo Park Magic. I love this book. This book is unlike anything I've ever read before. If you have always wondered what Florida man's fever dream would be like, this is your book. It's so different from anything I've ever read before, and so that's what I really appreciate about this press, is that they're really willing to push boundaries in terms of what literature is and what books and short stories should look like. So in that sense, I gotta give them their credit, but you know, when you're willing to be that experimental, sometimes it works and other times it doesn't. So I would also say, if you have not looked into your own city's local literary press, you should check it out, because you'd be surprised at what you find. Almost every single city, especially major cities or medium-sized cities, have some type of literary writing, reading community. And so it would be kind of cool if you figured out how you can get connected with those people. And sometimes you can even put together writing workshops or reading groups, or even get published in some way. So I don't know, just something to consider if that's the kind of route that you are looking to take your writing and reading career. Okay, this is the last book I read this month. This is The Most Extravagant Feast. I gave this book 5 stars. I don't know, man. 2020 is the year of poetry, apparently. This is a collection of poetry. It also won the Walt Whitman Award from the Academy of American Poets. I thought this book was so beautiful. Honestly, I would say if you've ever had the desire to sell all of your shit, to move to Virginia, to start a homestead, to go hunting on the weekends, this is the book that you need to buy. Miranda Lambert is quaking. So get yourself this book, because it is just so rich. And something that I really appreciate about Leah Naomi Green's voice, she's a scientist. So she teaches both English and environmental studies at the university that she works for, and it comes through. But I'm telling you, I think I said in my poetry video, Christina Olson, this is another woman who connects science and poetry, and I think that's a perspective that we haven't heard as much recently. So when I say like anyone can be a poet and it should be accessible to everyone, that's also what I'm talking about. I think oftentimes when people think of poetry, they want to think of these like buttoned up old white guys in their tweed jackets with elbow patches. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. Poetry is so inclusive and inviting if you let it be, and that's what I loved about this book. Like, you can tell this is a woman who loves living out in the country, who loves the Appalachia lifestyle and makes no apologies for it, and she shouldn't. She also does these really beautiful comparisons between her body while she was pregnant and the formation of the moon. This is not a new comparison. People have been comparing women's bodies to the moon for thousands of years. But what I really appreciate about it is just the care and the time she took to really think about the imagery and the emotional tension that she was building throughout her poems. I would also say, like, if you are a poet who is struggling with endings, all of these tabs are for the endings of her poems. She's just a master at her endings, and I think this is the kind of book that you need to be reading if you are a poet and you are looking to step up your game, if you're looking to step up your descriptions, if you're looking to step up your endings. This is a book you need to check out. Normally, I don't get poetry books like this who win these literary prizes and things like that because I think they can be very pretentious. This is not one of those books. Like, you can tell she's a down-home girl and she makes no apologies for it, and her work is so beautiful because of it. Buy this book. Okay, so those were the 8 books that I read this month. I have blabbered on long enough. This video is way too long, but thank you so much for sticking around, those of you who have. So if you are interested in purchasing any of these books, I have put links down below. If you are interested in buying my own book, Gwenthos from the Swamp, it's available down below as well. And I just want you all to be mindful of the things you're consuming in this time. I think right now we're in a space where we just want escapist entertainment, but sometimes it can be detrimental to our mental health and to our spiritual health if we are not being a little bit more careful about the things that we're consuming. So that's all I'll leave you with. If you want to follow me on a more day-to-day basis, I have accounts on Goodreads, Instagram, and Tumblr. My name on those platforms is @ShellyFlowers, and I hope to see you all next week. Also, I post videos every Sunday and Wednesday now, so bumping it up to 2 days a week because your girl's got nothing else to do. Hey. All right, ciao y'all.